right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. On behalf of Vivvi, I am so happy to welcome you today to this very special webinar in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm Jessica Palais, and I am the Director of Communications here at Vivvi. I am joined by Dr. Veronica Eyo, as you can see here. And we're going to dig into something that is such an important part of parenting, which is mental health. As a working mom of 2 daughters, which I already revealed, in this very fast-changing world, I can tell you honestly, I'm burnt out. I don't know if anybody else is feeling that. Feel free to throw your hand up in the air. I know that I'm not alone. Research shows that 2/3 of working parents are also feeling burnout. And there truly are just not enough practical structural supports to overcome the stress that working parents feel on a daily basis. That doesn't mean there's not hope. And my guest today is here to give us some of that hope. So we're so lucky to be joined by Dr. Veronica Eyo. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, your last name. Yes, awesome. Okay. She's a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in maternal mental health. She's also a Fair Play educator, and she leads Cooper's parent. She is a Cooper parenting group leader, which means that part of her job is to chat with parents daily about the stress that they're under and to help come up with solutions. She is also a mom of 3, so she is in it, and she understands firsthand what it's like to balance work, family, and all the things. If you're not already familiar with Vivvi, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we do. Vivvi's on a mission to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families. We currently have 8 campuses in and around New York City, including a brand new campus in Westchester, and they specialize in learning and care for children ages 6 weeks to 5 years old. We also partner with employers of all sizes to bring childcare and early learning to their working parents as a benefit. We truly believe it's our mission to support the whole family, not just our children. And that is why we're having this conversation today. Before I get started, I just wanted to share a few program logistics and then we'll dive in. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that you have taken time out of all of the things that you have to do to be here for the next 45 minutes. And, we appreciate you. We have about 45 minutes together. We're going to spend the first 30 minutes running through this thoughtful presentation and a few questions with Veronica. Then we're going to get to your questions. So the chat function is open. Feel free to throw your questions in now. You can throw them in later. And finally, I just want to acknowledge that mental health for working parents is a huge, huge topic. There's no way we're going to get through everything in 45 minutes. But I do promise that you'll walk away with at least one thing that is practical, applicable, and hopefully will make you feel a little less stressed out. So with that, let's dig in. Veronica, I would love for you to introduce yourself and Cooper and give everyone a little bit of an overview of what you're going to talk about today. And maybe just even set the stage of why so many of us are feeling this really intense.
Well, thank you for the amazing introduction. So just like Jessica mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Los Angeles. A little backstory of why I specialize in maternal mental health. When I had my first child, how old is she? 6, going to be 7. I experienced a really hard postpartum period. And I found that, especially as a woman of color, I really struggled with getting not only the support that I needed, but also feeling validated. There was so much focus on she's healthy, she's great, focus on that. And yes, she was healthy. That is great, but that does not take away from me and how I was feeling and navigating that first year. And so after I got the help that I needed, I made this my passion. And in that, I had 2 more kids. So I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Really struggling with that 3-year-old. So y'all who have 3-year-olds, we're all counting down to 4. It's my hardest age that I so far believe in. And my work at Cooper is, just like Jessica said, I talk to parents and we talk about the everyday struggles. And the way that we kind of do that is through the different opportunities that we offer here at Cooper. So the first thing that we do with Cooper is we have a matched parenting group. So what that means is we match our parents in similar ages or developmental stages that your child is in. So if you have a tween, we have a tween group. If you have a newborn, you're in a newborn group. If you have a 6-12 month, that's its own group. We don't loop you in with the newborns, right? We do try to really be specific because especially in the first year, we acknowledge that so many changes are happening, not only with baby, but also with yourself. And so these groups are meant to not only provide information about what is going on currently with your child, but also what to expect. And they are led by individuals such as myself, just talking about the various topics about parenting. And in there, you also get to not do parenthood alone. You're with other people who are like-minded and needing support during this stage. In addition to that, we also do something called office hours. So calling back what it was like to be in college, you would go in, ask your professor a question, leave, or maybe feel compelled to have to stay the whole time. But at least here in Cooper, we just have you come in and ask your question, and we give you a very personalized answer for what it is that you do. The thing that makes Cooper unique is we acknowledge that you are bombarded with so much information as a parent. That is just the reality of where we are in parenthood right now. You can look up what's the best bottle for my child, or what's the best shoe for my child to wear, and you're going to get 100 responses all at once. In addition to that, we have family, we have friends, we have the pediatrician, we have teachers, we have society, all these different places that are giving us information. And so what we do here at Cooper is we give you the information, so kind of weeding out some of the extra noise that you may hear, and present you with options. So one of the things that I believe in as a therapist, mother, myself, Coop leader, is that as a parent, I make the best decision with what information I have available. And so, but I also give myself grace that I can change my mind. As a parent, I'm not always going to show up the way that I want, but my intention is always true, or trying to be good also. Not always a good parent, but I can always apologize and repair. And that's its own little thing that we kind of learn here at Cooper. So we offer these office hours, as well as a workshop such as these, where we talk about various different parenting topics, talking with experts. And then the last thing, which I think is my favorite part of Cooper, is we have a massive group text where you get to interact with all the members of Cooper, as well as the group leaders, and ask your questions and get the support. We really don't want you to be doing parenthood alone. And that's something that we'll talk about in this presentation, that unfortunately, there is this pressure to either feel like you need to do it alone, or just also based on where we live, that is kind of what the reality is of our situation. So we need support, and Cooper is really there to kind of provide that. So long-winded introduction about Cooper, but let's go a little bit talking about parenthood and what that means. When we become parents, our identities shift in many ways. And prior to becoming parents, a lot of us would use either racial or ethnic identities, our career, the extracurriculars, things that we liked, our gender identities, to kind of define who we are. But when you become a parent, that still stands, and you're in charge of a person or people, depending on how many you have. And with that, when that shift occurs, many parents often will report feelings of guilt and stress that come with this identity shift. This can be from the societal pressures that parents may feel that they need to get everything right, or feel that just the lack of the support in making these decisions. We're actually the first generation where there's this pressure that is put on us to feel like we have to do parenting right, whatever that means. And so there's this idea that there is one right way of parenting. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not true. Okay, it's not true. But unfortunately, that pressure is still kind of there. And so when we're talking about our shift into parents, right, we acknowledge this identity shift. And then specifically, I want to take time to call out something they may be experienced by mothers. And that is, as mothers, there's a societal pressure to kind of do it all, and have many hats that you may hold, so many roles that you may hold. And there's this term called mother load, and it's used to describe the various responsibilities that mothers have to balance. And it's not just responsibilities that we can see, it's also a bit of the stuff that's invisible. And we call that invisible labor. So let me give an example of what that looks like. So here's a cute picture of a baby. Baby does not have clothes, but let's pretend I have to clothe this baby, right? You may think, that's it, get clothes on the baby. But it's more complicated than that, right? One, we have to buy the clothes. Where do we buy the clothes? We have to wash those clothes. What kind of detergent are we using to wash the baby's clothes? Are we using the same as everybody else, or are we doing a sensitive one from that? When we decide on the detergent, when do we decide that we need to buy more? When it starts to run out? Who knows that when that happens? What store do we have to go and buy that from? Right? These things that I'm describing are invisible, right? We just see put clothes on baby, but there's a lot of thinking that goes with it behind it. And so that is an example of what that mother load encompasses. It's not just the things that you can see, but it's also the invisible labor. And that goes a little bit of the work that I do as a Fair Play facilitator as well. The book is called Fair Play by Eve Brodsky, and it really talks about making that invisible labor that I just described visible in order for yourself, your partner, your community to be able to work together in this parenthood journey. So 32% of parents feel lonely and isolated. That is the current statistic of right now. I would think that that number is rising just in when I talk to parents on a daily basis. And part of that about feeling isolated is one, parents feeling like they don't have family around. And some of that may be true. We live in cities that we did not grow up in, or our grandparents or our extended family are too far away. And then lack of support groups, right? And while some of us, some individuals do have grandparents who can care for their children, that's not always the case, right? We do have to outsource some of us our support, but that also requires energy, right? What daycare are we going to do? How much does that cost? And we'll go into talking about more into that too. And so a lot of parents feel like, not only do I feel like I'm trying to be the best parent that I can be, but I feel lonely. I feel like I'm not doing it accurately, and it really takes a toll on our mental health. And today we're going to talk about ways that we can kind of alleviate that in a little bit. So the specific thing about working parents is that they have the additional struggle of balancing family life and also growing or maintaining their career at the same time. Okay, that whole sentence, I'm tired saying that. I'm in that too for myself. Like, yes, this is my job, my passion, love it. But I have 3 kids on top of that. There's me. What does Veronica like to do? She's working on that. In case you guys are wondering, we'll talk about that. I do got my hobbies going, right? But this is like a very logistical and an emotional task. And oftentimes as working parents, and I'll mention it here, but I also want to highlight that there is a specific attention that goes into like returning to work after baby, like that transition. But the reality is the transition never ends. Okay, like change is constant. The transition never ends in you being a working parent. As your kids get older, there are different things that come up that you need to balance. If right now it's daycare drop off and pickup, it's going to change into school drop off and pickup. I have a secret annoyance with the early dismissal days of schools when I have to go pick them up and remembering it, that, right? And then in addition to that, your child becomes a person, right? They may not like that after school program that you want to put them in. They want to go home with a friend. Do we like that friend? Do we know that family? It takes energy to kind of get to know that family in itself, right? And so in this, it feels like we have to do so much, and the changes are kind of continuous, and yet the guilt is still there as a working parent, right?
I was just going to ask, and I think this kind of leads really well into this next slide. You talk about working parents as kind of a specific segment of parents. Can you talk a little bit about some of the really specific stresses that somebody who is working outside the home? And of course, I do want to say that all parents are working parents, whether you work outside the home or in the home. But maybe just to talk a little bit more about when you work for somebody else outside your home, outside of your family, what are some of the specifics that you are also having to deal with?
Well, there are many, but I'm going to focus on 3 just for the sake of time. So the first one is childcare. Okay. Not only is it about finding a childcare that you trust, because that is in itself a whole thing, but also the cost. Childcare is expensive. According to a study at care.com, the average cost of childcare is about $1,500 a month on one child. So that equates to about $18,000 in a year, right? Now, in that, we're not even just talking dollars. We also have not acknowledge holidays. Your kid's going to get sick. Let's forget, they will get sick. And then having to navigate that childcare with that. It's actually not uncommon. And I will say, I'll speak to it myself. When there was at one point, I had 3 kids, it was the price of putting them into childcare was more than what I was paying to where I lived, my mortgage for what I was paying. And that's the reality of that. And when we think of childcare, I think oftentimes people focus on the amount, like of how much it is, but also we have to acknowledge like what happens if you don't have adequate childcare, making the decision about stepping back in your career. Who does that if you're partnered? What does that look like? Especially when we're talking about our own identity of where we want to be, right? And in addition, there's a constant balance of work and family. So the COVID pandemic really brought to the center of the ability to be able to experience flexible work hours. So if everyone can recall 2020, March, right? The world shut down, right? And it took a while for us to kind of get back in it, and telework became a thing. Possible. Obviously, there were some individuals who did have to go in to work. They were essential workers, but even that, in doing that, the work schedule did change in a bit. And so when parents who were able to experience flexible work hours, they actually reported feeling a more happy balance between being able to do both work and life right together. And as the pandemic progressed and things started to return to normal, I hate using that word normal because I don't think things went back to the way it was prior to 2020, but parents really began to having increased anxiety or fear about what that would look like. Because it wasn't just about work. What we were able to do at home was that getting able to do some of the things that before we were doing after 5 or on the weekends or whatever time your day kind of ended, right? And so our stress, even though individuals say, well, leave work at work, leave home at home, that's not the reality of a working parent. Because even if your child is in a perfect childcare situation and they are not sick, have to put that on there, they're not sick, right? There's still other things that may be coming up to arise. What time of year is it? So let's talk about the time of year that we are right now. It's about to be summer. What are we gonna do for the summer? It's gonna be hot, right? If you have older kids, are we doing summer camp? Are we able to afford summer camp? What time are the hours of summer camp? Researching those things. Do we have 4th of July plans? Are we already thinking about September, going back to school, what that would look like? Doctor's appointments, right? There's so much that we're doing even when we're working and kind of balancing that piece. And then the parents do report just like relentless stress, right? Whether it's coming from their employers or from their partner, the lines are really blurred between work and home life. And when those lines are blurred, we can feel like we're not doing well on either end. We're not doing well as a worker, we're not doing well as a parent, as a partner. We got parents in those things, right? So the US scores lowest on parent satisfaction, thanks to the least amount of parental support in the workplace and in the community. And like I mentioned earlier, we are the first generation, millennial parents are the first generation that to believe that there's a right way to parent. And so there is a constant pressure of like feeling like, how do you meet my expectations as a parent? And then also your own individual needs as a mom. I'll say that for myself. And then on top of that, let me just add social media. Oh man, right? We're the first generation that really have that ability to be able to compare ourselves across the world from people, not just people in our community. And so when we're talking about parenting, it's like a continuous stress, right? And so one of the ways that we can kind of, looking at that and talking about that is I want to say that work-life balance isn't a thing. There's no one perfect way that we're in a seesaw. We all know what a seesaw is, right? There's no one way for us to be balanced completely on that. The reality is, because there's a physical toll when we're talking about motherhood, it impacts our physical health and well-being. And I say that as a maternal mental health therapist, it's taking a toll on our mental health. I'm seeing an increase of anxiety and depression, and just balancing the many things that we do as mothers. And then our capacity continues to expand. The mental load continues to increase. In addition to that, we have gender expectations that come up, right? And then talking about that, right, we're also talking about home maintenance. Your home doesn't magically stay clean unless we outsource it for that, which, yay, if you do, that is also a tool. There's no shame in that. We say that because unfortunately in society, there is that shame that comes up. You have someone to come clean your home? Why? Why can't you do it? What are you doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong, right? We need that. We need to outsource and kind of do these things. And then when we're talking about our COVID-19 pandemic, there was research that showed like working moms or working women were affected more than working men or working fathers during that time. More specifically with like the balance of the home maintenance, familial obligations, work kind of seesaw that we were kind of on. And when we're talking about working mothers, let's talk about high achievers likely to lean towards perfectionist parenting. And so it sounds exactly like what that is. And that's like that there is a one perfect way to parent, and holding yourself to these expectations that are so, so high. And when you don't meet it, you feel like a failure, right?
Before you jump to the next slide, Veronica, I was hoping you could talk a little bit too, and I noticed that I think there are some dads on our call as well. Dads are certainly becoming kind of changing that paradigm a little bit. What do you see in your practice in terms of mental health of dads, and how dads are struggling? How does it manifest? And are you seeing any of the same trends?
I am seeing something similar, but there's also something different. So when we're talking about dads, there's actually something called like masked male depression, right? So talking about fathers. And so when we hear the word depression, we hear sadness. Yes, that's part of it, right? But what I have found in my dads that come into my practice is that their symptoms don't necessarily look like sadness. They look more of like irritability or aggressiveness or hostility. I see more dads reporting increase in substance use to kind of balance or cope with the feelings that they're experiencing. Anytime I get a dad in my practice that comes and sees me, I do internally just jump for joy, I guess that's the word I would say, because there's still a strong taboo against men seeking services, mental health services. And in addition to that, fathers, right? The role of a father has changed dramatically. Let's just pick from like the 1950s, right? In our generation now, fathers not only have the expectation of like working just like mothers, but also we have the most active generation of dads than we've had previously. And so dads may also experience feeling that since all the focus is on baby or on mother or on the child, right, they may feel very burdened or trapped, right? Feeling like no one's really asking me how I'm doing. They just assume that I'm okay. They just assume that I don't need support, and that's not the case. Dads definitely experience it too. Dads do feel a sense of failure, and also acknowledging that they have their own expectations, whether they were set by their father or a lack of father, or what they think fatherhood should kind of be like. And then in addition to that, this is changing, but this is a thing, is that we have also found that like males typically have a smaller support network of friends. Whereas like when we think of like women mothers, we think talk, we talk it all right. What kind of societal expectation that we do that. And unfortunately, men don't necessarily have that, but that is changing. Okay. And one thing that I always hold on to is something that I see in my community of dads, is they do an annual bike ride. They get together and they just do like this bike ride to talk about all things parenthood and normalizing. Yeah, that parenthood is hard. And we also do need a break from our partners and being a parent and just be us and laugh and be with other dads who are in this bit together. I'm going to shift a little bit to go on with talking about dads and that piece is let's talk about parental stress, right? And this really is when we feel like the demands of parenting are really high and we feel like we don't have the resources to be able to manage it. Parent stress can be elevated just by just thinking about, I know we think about the things that we need to do as a parent, but also we also have to factor in the child that we have. Each child has a different temperament. You are not the same parent, and for the parents on the call on here, myself included, who have multiples, they're all different. They all need support from you as a parent in different ways. In addition, if your child has a medical need or behavioral diagnosis, that can elevate parental stress. I mentioned we have limited social interactions, social support, and we do feel isolated. There's also environmental factors that come around. There's also discrimination that comes about, or having a child under 5. It's hard work to be a parent. And we have found that parents are significantly more stressed today than they were in previous generations. However, I do want to say not all stress is bad, because I don't want you to feel like this is a Debbie Downer today. There is something called positive stress, right? And such as like the first day of school. Do you remember the first day of school jitters, or the first day we drop off our kid at daycare? Yes, there's this picture that I'm going to be sad, even into daycare. I will say I was that parent the first time around. I did feel that sadness. The third time around, I did feel it, but there was more like joy that I could drink a hot cup of coffee by myself, right? So there's like this normal stress. These are like positive things that just go with like typical life. Your kid is trying something new. You're starting a new job, right? Maybe in your previous job, you were stepping into parenthood and then you took on a different job, right? And so there is that positive stress, elevated symptoms that we can feel. And then in the middle, we talk about tolerable stress. This is something that is serious, but it's very temporary. So this can be an injury. This can also be life happening, such as like the loss of a loved one, or divorce. These things do happen. They do hurt. They do impact us, but they're not forever, right? They do kind of have its effect, and we slowly kind of move on. And then we have something called toxic stress. And this is this often occurs with, there's just like the intense chronic stress, and there's like no buffer through positive factors or relationships. And when we are experiencing stress, and you feel unsupported or incapable, that incapable can be different, right? So I'm talking about the positive and tolerable stress, right? First day of school jitters, there's usually someone that would be like, it's okay. Your kid will come back and be like, I had a great day, or I had an awful day, and then that's its own thing, right? But you can, that that's a normal part of life. It's something typical that we can kind of expect. And even things such as like injury or the loss of a loved one, it is hurt. And usually we do try to encourage some support, whether that's sending you well wishes. I'm going to send you a Grubhub $50 card so you don't have to cook dinner, right? We do encourage support to kind of be a factor that can kind of come in. But how does that stress impact our parenting? So the big key thing that I see is it undermines our connection with our children, right? When we think of parent and child, we are really united by our connection and thought. Now, you may have a baby and you may feel like maybe they don't necessarily know everything that's going on, but you feel it, right? Our connection to our children is a big component of why maybe some of you guys are here, because you're feeling burnt out and tired and feel like I'm just not connecting with anyone, right? I'm going to talk about more tips about this in the future and as we go on, but I do want to say when it comes to connection, because we know that stress does impact our parenting and impacts our ability to connect, is that sometimes we have to redefine what connection means or how that may look like. If you have a baby, child, a little one, right, we're going to focus on like meeting the needs of that baby. So maybe the connection doesn't feel like a feeling, but it's by the actions that we do. Are you feeding the baby when baby cries? Are you picking up the baby when baby is picked up? What needs to be picked up, right? Changing the diaper when diaper needs to be changed, right? You may feel like, well, I need to kind of do that. Yes, you do. And that is how you continuously connect with your baby in doing these things. It may not be a feeling that you feel all the time, but these things do make a slight difference in increasing our connection for our children. As well as when we talk about older kids, as we get older, one of the tips that I'll talk about is when it talks to connection is making dedicated time to be able to connect with your child. And that may look like if you have dinner together, how was your day? What was the best thing about your day? What was the worst thing about your day? Or my favorite, let's do breakfast instead of dinner, because at dinner, we're rushing to extracurricular activities. We're rushing after school. I'm so tired from work. But at breakfast, my day hasn't taken over. So this breakfast is when I take the time to be able to connect with you. What are you looking forward to in school? What happened yesterday? What are the things that we can kind of talk about? And in the same way, share for yourself, right? Stress makes us feel less aware and less sensitive and less responsive to our children. So sometimes our actions, even though we need to do them, even though we don't feel it completely, but it does help us continue to feel connected with our children, right? And it does also worsen our self-regulation. So parents' expectations of themselves, right? Our children, we have this one, our children reflect our parenting. That is not true. They do to an extent, but not completely true. There's this idea that outcomes are guaranteed, right? If I parent in this way, or if I provide them with this tool in this way, this is what will happen, right? Or the pressure that our children must be exceptional, right? When you say exceptional, or I say exceptional, I think many other things, right? It can look different for every family. Or the expectation that we need to shield our children from struggle or negative emotions. That's a big one that I am seeing now currently in parents, right? This idea of, I don't want my children to struggle, because I remember what that was like and I know how that impacted me, right? And that is one that we have to change the definition for. And then there's the balance of self-esteem and confidence that are built on praise. And that changes a bit, right? And some of the work that you'll see talks about, it's not all about just saying the words. Sometimes it's about praising the hard work that they did to really, that just the hard work, not so much the outcome. It can really increase their self-esteem and confidence. So what do we do about all this, right? I mentioned already about scheduling a time for you and your child, one-on-one time, right? My favorite thing I mentioned about either doing at breakfast or at dinner, but I will be honest, I have a million things going on at one time, and I have 3 kids, and they all know to get the timer on my phone, and that is my uninterrupted time. Sometimes it's longer than the time that it is, but I have to schedule it. I have a block in I'm not perfect at this. I want to say this. I'm not perfect at this every day. Most of the time, though, my kids will say, can I get the phone and put the timer on? Right? And usually it's 10 minutes. And I do whatever that kid wants to do, short of like anything illegal or breaking anything or like any of that. I just want to note that, right? And oftentimes, because my kids are 6, 4, and 3, right? The 6-year-old, she's obsessed with writing lists. Okay. She also gets that from mom. Okay. I'll admit. So we got running lists of things that we have to do. And that's what she wants to do. Right. Correction. She wants to write the list. I need to spell out that list. So my spelling is exceptional right now, y'all. Okay. Because I have to be checking myself. Okay. But they all know that when that timer goes off, sometimes I'm able to say, like, let's keep going, but sometimes I'm not. And does it hurt to have to go jump on to do something else? Yes. But it's the best that I can do for right now. It took a lot of time to get there. I'm not going to lie, because that guilt is really there. But if my kid gets 10, 15 minutes, 3 kids get 10, 15 minutes from me uninterrupted, I see the difference in my kids, right? I want to give them more, but sometimes we have to start small, right? And in that, we talk about establishing boundaries. This is where we kind of, with our workload and expectations, right? So in your work, if you do have the work, that you can kind of find out what are the obligations of the things that you need to do, right? How do you use your time in the work that you're doing? Unfortunately, a lot of us, I'm guilty of this, except in session, except when I'm a therapist in session, I multitask. I'm doing a million things at a time. I am cooking on this Instapot, listening to something on my ears, all right, or researching about something, because I am guilty of saying, "Hey Alexa, what is the most recent thing I did? Oh, what are the times of the closest Taekwondo classes in my area?" Right, literally asking Alexa for that information while I'm doing that, right, and having her like listed on my notes app, right, like it's there, right. We're just doing so many things. We need to establish boundaries with those things. And talking about like what are the things that are the most important. So as a parent, one of the things that helps me is to identify, I cannot juggle, but if I could juggle, I have many balls in the air. I don't even know if this is how you juggle, y'all, but get with me, right? My expectation, I have so many balls in the air, but some of the balls can bounce, or bouncy balls, they're rubber, right? They can bounce. So if I drop it, it can still bounce and I can catch it, right? And keep going, or it can bounce a few times and I can catch it, right? Nothing bad will happen if it bounces. I also have glass balls though, things that if I drop it, they're gonna shatter, right? And I have to acknowledge that not everything is a glass ball. I know it feels like everything's a glass ball, but not everything is a glass ball, right? And so in my juggle, there are gonna be some balls that I hold on to a bit longer. I'm assuming, I don't know how to juggle, but I'm assuming in the thing, there's some that you hold, right? And there's some that I can't do, and that's just going to bounce, and I'm going to catch them in a bit later, right? And so I need to establish those boundaries for myself. And in this thing that I said in the beginning, it's okay to establish your boundary. And if it doesn't work, you can change your mind. You can make a different boundary, shift it, do something different, right? We're not just stuck with making that decision. And that's unfortunately something that parents will talk to me about, kind of like this paralysis of feeling like, not only can I not make the decision, but I feel like I need to make the right decision, because then if I don't make the right decision, everything's going to blow up. I need you to make a decision for that boundary, right? Also, we're talking about forgiving yourself, right? You will lose it. I'm just going to tell you right now, you will lose it. I lost it. I actually don't know if Jessica's lost it, but I can bet that Jessica's lost it. Okay. Lose it. Okay? And then this is something that we tell kids, and this is in the research, right? We talk about repair. You're going to lose it, but you can also repair it. You can come back, right? I lost it and yelled at my kids. I am so sorry that I yelled at you. Mommy was overwhelmed. 10 out of 10, they'll say, I forgive you. You know, it's okay. Unless you were my 3-year-old 3 years ago who said, I could not sleep, Mom, thinking about the time that you yelled at me. I just could not sleep. Yeah, that guilt got me there. Why 3 is not my favorite age, because they're into emotions and words, right? She moved past it, okay? Still wants to be like mommy, but 10 out of 10 times they'll say it's okay, unless you're my daughter 3 years ago who just really stabbed it with the things, right? And you gotta forgive yourself, because you want to teach teach that skill to your kids, right? They will make mistakes. And as a person who sees millennials, adults in therapy, right? A lot of the work that we're doing is learning how not only to forgive others, but to forgive yourself. It's hard work, right? And forgiveness sometimes looks like an action, right? I know I didn't show up the best that I wanted to, but I'm going to try again. I may not feel that way. Like the comment I just said to my daughter saying, the guilt right there, she's being honest, but I'm going to act differently and I can make the decision to do something, right? Be willing to admit mistakes, ask for help, and acknowledge the mess. We're all messy, right? But these are our skills that we're learning for ourselves alongside with our children, right? Turn off what isn't helping and find out what does help, right? So for a lot of my clients, and it's one that I use myself that I recommend, I don't ask advice from people who are not in the same parenting journey that I'm in, right?
I love that. I love that.
Right?
Like, don't ask for advice whose advice you wouldn't really take anyway.
Yeah, because everybody has an opinion, right? And what that does is we're figuring out what helps me in that moment, right? You've heard perhaps about routines and how they help you and they help your child regulate, right? They do, right? But what I want you to imagine when you're thinking of routines is thinking more of like just a sequence of events. It's not a time thing. Like at 6, we're gonna have dinner, and then at 6:35, we're gonna clean up from dinner, and not time wise. It's just we're gonna eat dinner. After, I would like to clean up, right? And we'll want to do that, but it may not be at 6:35. It may be at 6:45, right? Because one kid particularly had a hard time. Or you're having an amazing meal because you made that one meal that everybody liked. Parenting win right there, that everybody ate, nobody complained. Okay? And we're all sitting there having a good time, right? Routines help to know what's coming next, also for ourselves. And then last one I want to say is like, make time for you, right? One of the questions that I saw of like, how can we make time for ourselves, especially when we're partnered up? And I want to say, it's going to look different in the season that you're in, right? So if you have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, probably it's going to be harder to get those extended time away, right? Just because of the nature that you're in, right? But there is an opportunity to build it into your day in small increments, right? Does that look like not eating your lunch while doing something else? Is that something time for you? Like, just to seriously just sit there and not be working. We're all guilty of it. We've all done it, right? Does that make time for you look like just like scheduling a class? I will say, from my favorite ways of why I'm taking care of myself, I have no rhythm, y'all. Just gonna let y'all, no rhythm whatsoever. But I am taking dance classes. They are scheduled, and I keep the schedule because if my sons had a class, I would move heaven and earth to be there to take them to that class, right? Holding that same thing for yourself.
I love that you kind of jumped into some of the questions that I know we received prior to this webinar, and I would encourage you. We'll keep talk to Veronica here for another 10 minutes or so. So feel free to chime into our chat, ask a question, and I would love. I love this quote so much. So definitely dig into it. I do want to ask, how do you know when you are kind of beyond burnout? How do you know when something like making time for self-care is not enough? Like, what are some of those signs? And this was a question that we got from, before our webinar. How do you know you need more? And what does intervention look like?
So it does look like when those small breaks that you give you are just like not enough, right? Like you're like, I did the thing, but I still feel irritable. I still feel really angry. So this is where we'll see, or even for myself, I'll see more of like the hostility, aggressiveness, just a very hard look on the life that you're doing and feeling like I'm not doing anything right. Right? In a perfect world, I would love to say, here's $1 million, go to a private island and like rejuvenate yourself. It's what I'd love to prescribe to every single person. But I know that's not the situation, right? And so if you feel like you're beyond it, because I will say, like, some of us do know when we're beyond it. Like it's been going on for, I will say, if it's been going on for longer than 2 weeks, if you are feeling like it's not getting better, I'm doing the day to day, it's not getting better, I just feel like, what am I doing? I'm questioning everything. Okay. That's not an official diagnosis, by the way, so don't quote me on that. But typically, I will say if you're feeling it consistently for more than 2 weeks, you're in that burnout stage. Okay. And so when you're in that burnout stage, we're not going to fully trust all your feelings. So let me rephrase how that looks like. So that means that, like, you may not feel like going on that walk around your neighborhood because you're just like, it's just going to take away time. There's no point. And it's going to start raining before you even know it. And my boss is going to call me. This kid is going to whine. It's going to be all that, right? The thoughts that come on. You need to do it despite how you feel. You cannot trust your feelings of it. Getting yourself out of burnout is an uphill climb. And while some of us do need that break, that's really not the reality of it, right? Yes, go to therapy, but your therapist is more likely going to say, same thing, let's talk about it. What's there? What are the areas that we can set boundaries and do these things? At the end of the day, it does come with action that we need to do, right? And you have to do them, right? I need you to put it on your calendar. Go for a run, take a boxing class, like, make time to sit by yourself every day, right? I can't give like a specific thing about what to do because everyone's burnout looks different. But what is consistent is that you cannot trust how you feel in that moment. You just need to do the actions that perhaps a therapist or a friend is telling you, like these positive actions that don't necessarily feel positive to you, to kind of slowly get yourself climbing.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
I'm just going to highlight right now this quote because I love Shonda Rhimes. All right. But in case you don't know who Shonda Rhimes is, she wrote Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder. Right. And so, one thing, if you know about Shonda Rhimes, she has 3 children. She's an exceptional writer, in my very biased opinion. Right. And she was asked, how do you do it all? Right. And one thing that I really liked about what she says is that if you see me that I'm killing it on the Scandal script for work, I'm probably missing bath and story time at home, right? If I'm at home sewing my kids' Halloween costumes, I'm probably blowing off a rewrite I was supposed to turn in. If I am succeeding at one, I'm inevitably failing at the other. And that is a norm. We have to, in the lie that we have of like, we need to do it all, is finding a way to embrace the happiness in doing what you need to do as you want to do it. And that means that some balls are going to be bouncing, they're going to be dropped. Anyone have any other questions?
Feel free to chime in. You can even throw it in the Q&A. While we're just asking for those kind of final questions, I'm going to ask, I thought, a really great one. You talked a little bit about boundaries, but we got this question quite a bit. The question is something like, I want to be fully present with my baby, but I find it hard to take my mind off of work. For context, this person is 1 month, this has a baby who's 1 month old. She's back online, working from home a few hours a day. She says, I can't delegate what I'm working on. So any tips on how to clear my mind from work when I'm with my baby and vice versa?
Tactical thing, I do something called like a brain dump, right? So I carry like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a paper and pal kind of gal. So I have my Post-it and my pen, right? And when the things kind of arise when I'm with my kid, or when I had that 1 month old, I would like write it down. And I would just be like, I'll post it for later, right? It looked like a madhouse. I'm gonna let you know. It looked like a madhouse because I had Post-its everywhere, especially in the middle of the night. Okay. If you were a bit more organized and want to use your notes app, do that. But the idea is like, you need to get it out of your mind. It's not going to take away the task, but what happens is we have so many things circulating or many tabs open, because we're all guilty of this. We look up something, we leave the tab open so we can go back to it, right? Because we don't want to forget. Get it out of your head, even for a moment. Trust that you will go back to that list, right? It's not always going to work, but you have to do something. You can actually, yes, you can have many tabs open, but we all know it slows down our computer, right? I need to keep a running list of what's going on there. And when you're away from that 1 month old, tackle the items that are work related. When you're with that 1 month old, tackle the things that are child related. My favorite memory of myself, and I have a little one, is I was up in the middle of the night nursing a child. Yes, nursing, child rocking, right? I needed to order things from Amazon. Thank goodness for Amazon. And ordered it. Went to sleep, put the baby to sleep, went to sleep, woke up, and we ordered the same thing on Amazon again because I had many tabs open. Like I just got two of the same thing and had to resend one of it, right? But
I
I'm
love
trying
it.
to do the best.
The
Right?
things we've ordered from Amazon when we weren't paying attention or should have been.
So many things,
Yes.
so many things. And I'm always in awe. Like, what did we do before Amazon? I can't even remember.
Yes.
Right.
We did get one question that I'm gonna read to you from one of our attendees. And it's a specific question, but I think we can even reframe it to think about this in general. This question is, at what age can you leave a toddler with grandparents if you want to take a 2-week vacation and you can't take your child with you for various reasons? And I think this question is really a good one because it's not really, and forgive me for saying, maybe it's not about the age, but how do you leave a child? How do you kind of let go of that responsibility and really truly get away with your partner or with someone else? How do you balance the kind of emotional back and forth there?
So the emotional back and forth, you're gonna be emotional. Also, but they'll plan that you won't be emotional. And it's happened before where people are not emotional, right? But logistically, I think for things like this, like leaving for an extended trip, what are the things I would ask yourself? What are the things that you need to have answered or need to do in order for you to feel comfortable? So you have a 2 or 3 year old. Is the grandparents' house baby proofed? If it's not, can they come stay at your house? Would it make you feel more at ease? Are they able to kind of do those things? Ask those questions of yourself. What are the things that would make you feel comfortable logistic wise that you can change? Okay. You can't make your grandparents younger or the grandparents younger or whatever it is. Like, what are the things that you can't change? We got to start with those things. And then you may not like my answer, but you need to make the jump. You need to make it. Are you going to cry? Maybe. Are you maybe not going to enjoy the vacation as you would have thought? Maybe. But you're never going to know. And like increasing your tolerance of how to do that, it just takes time. One thing that I recall or I have parents think about is like, when you have a newborn, some of us have a hard time envisioning what it would be like to go back to work and not see our child all day, right? They're like, how do you do that? Send them to school, right? It's a foreign concept until you do it. Now, most of us take them to school. If you're like me, I barely slow the car line, slow the car in the car line, like, get out of the car, I'm running late, love you, right? With a baby, I never would have envisioned myself doing that. But I did it, right? I took them to school. So with this, on that 2-week vacation, what are the logistical things that you need to make you feel safe, you and your partner feel safe? And then go. Have low expectations for yourself on whether you'll enjoy it or not, but just go. If you're going to cry the whole time, that's okay. But go and work up to it. There's no perfect way of doing it. Right?
Thank you
I
so
hope you
much.
enjoy your 2-week vacation.
Me
So welcome.
too. I know we are close to time, so I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Veronica and to all of you for making the time to be with us today. We will send this webinar out to everybody via email, so you can watch it again. You can share it with friends. I will also include a link to Cooper Parenting. And as always, feel free to email us, reach out with any other questions that you may have, and we'll do our best to get them answered. So with that, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining.